Well, a growing number of critics challenging President Obama's reaction to the ambush attack on two cops in Ferguson, Missouri. The president initially responded with a tweet, writing, quote, "Violence against police is unacceptable. Our prayers are with the officers in Missouri." Adding the path to justice, he added that the path to justice is one all of us must travel together. Some folks took to social media to point out that Michael Brown got a speech and 40 DOJ investigators, while the shooting of two cops got a tweet. Hours later, President Obama showed up on the Jimmy Kimmel Show to discuss the situation.
What had been happening in Ferguson was oppressive and objectionable and was worthy of protest. But there was no excuse for criminal acts. And whoever fired those shots shouldn't detract from the issue. They're criminals. They need to be arrested. And then what we need to do is to make sure that like-minded, good-spirited people on both sides, law enforcement who have a terrifically tough job, and people who understandably don't want to be stopped and harassed just because of their race, that we're able to work together to try to come up with some good answers.
Leslie Marshall is a progressive radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor, and Rich Lowry is a National Review editor and also a Fox News contributor. Rich, let me start with you on this. So he said, all the things you would expect a president to say in that tweet about condemning the shooting and so on. So why is he taking heat?
Well, look, of course, the President of the United States is going to say shooting cops is wrong and no one should do it and everyone should show respect for the police. But it's clear just over the course of this entire controversy and others, his real passion is with the sense of injustice of American policing and with the protesters. And just think about what he said on Jimmy Kimmel. These shootings shouldn't distract from the main issue. That's what Eric Holder said as well. So what they seem to be suggesting is one of the really bad things about the shootings is going to take the air out of the anti-police protests in the DOJ campaign against Ferguson, which is perverse. The worst thing about shooting cops is that cops get shot.
Leslie, what about it?
I understand what you're saying, Rich, but I think, if you want to look for something, you're going to find something, and I don't think there's something here. I think as President of the United States, he said what he was supposed to say, not just in the tweet, but on Jimmy Kimmel as well. And when we look back to when Michael Brown was shot, if you remember, his critics were angry with him for not speaking out when Michael Brown was shot immediately. And it was after 3 days of violence, protest, and unrest in Ferguson that the president stated what he stated at that time. We haven't seen, thankfully, that type of response after these two police officers have been shot.
But what about,
so I don't
Leslie,
think it's that he cares.
Let me ask you, Leslie, about the optics of it, because, as these folks on Twitter are saying, he did come out, he made a statement, the Attorney General made a statement, and so on, and two cops get shot. One gets shot in the face, and I'll grant you, they lived, so, no one died, but still, two cops were shot in the face. And the president goes on Jimmy Kimmel, and Michelle Obama shows up in public on a television show and is dancing with Ellen. And there's nothing wrong with dancing with Ellen. Makes everybody happy to dance with Ellen. But the optics.
I understand, but when we look back at two police officers who did not survive and lost their lives in New York, the president was in Hawaii and on vacation at the time, and he made a statement again at how horrific this is and that there is no excuse for any violence. Should the President of the United States and the First Lady be speaking about everything horrific that happens, every shooting, whether it's a police officer, an unarmed person, whether they're a person of color or other? I don't think that's what we elected him to do.
It's not that. Well, you tell me, Rich. Is it that he needs to speak out every time there's violence against a cop, or is it that they have to be generally more responsible about the rhetoric on these kinds of things?
I think it's more the latter. And again, you just look on Jimmy Kimmel, and the president is pretending, and he's a very smart man. He obviously must know he's conflating two things, but he's pretending as though these protests from the beginning were about traffic stops in Ferguson, which they weren't. They were about the allegation that a Ferguson police officer assassinated a young black man who was attempting to surrender. The basis of this entire movement from the beginning. It's the basis of protest in Ferguson even now. So if the president has a view of those traffic stops as being racist, I don't think the report necessarily proves that, but that's his opinion. But he at least should have the honesty to say, look, all of you who believe that this was an assassination that was driven by racism, that is wrong. We know, as far as we can know the facts, that is wrong. But he doesn't have the honesty to do that because he's playing to these Ferguson truthers that just can't give up the lie about what happened on that fateful day between Officer Wilson and Michael Brown.
In his view, clearly, the issue is what the second part of the DOJ report about Ferguson. The issue is not that Officer Darren Wilson was completely unfairly indicted by several politicians, including the governor of Missouri, very publicly, which stoked the fires, as you heard it in the prosecutor's view, of those protesters who were out there. The issue is not that law enforcement officers are now in danger as a result, in part, of some of the rhetoric, the boneheaded, non-fact-based rhetoric we have seen bandied about. Look, listen to what this guy told Steve Harrigan at the protest in Ferguson just last night. Listen.
Are you upset that those two officers were shot?
I'm upset Darren Wilson is a free man and Mike Brown is dead. That's what I'm upset about.
Leslie, couldn't we use a little bit more vocal comments from the politicians on part one of the DOJ report?
I don't disagree with that. But the whole issue that we have in this nation, this whole divide between especially the African American community, or the perceived idea from the African American community that they are being racially profiled, and when you do have the latter part of this report, this is why we're seeing these protests. This is why we're seeing this anger.
Wouldn't it help if there were a light shining on the fact that the beliefs about Officer Wilson were totally wrong? Michael Brown was the aggressor. Michael Brown was the one who was putting somebody's life in danger, not Darren Wilson. That's what Eric Holder's DOJ believes.
And go
ahead, Rich. Eric Holder has said there's not going to be any charges. The federal government.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Leslie, no one was going out in the streets with chants about traffic stops. That was not what this was about. The emotive thing was the alleged
Sorry, I was wrong. Because
murder.
Heartbreak. Great to see you both.